Joined live today in the studio by Rob from Mantic Games. Hi, Rob.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks very much. Thanks also for being here. Are you? You've got a particularly fancy studio. I was just commenting on.
Well, no, this is what I was saying. This is actually my bedroom. The wife was particularly happy when I chose this wallpaper. So I wake up in the morning thinking about Mantic and go to bed thinking about it as well. That's the idea.
Okay. All right. Well, that's dedication. I like that.
I'll show you my tattoo. Go on when I rip off my shirt.
Wow. Actually, someone messaged me about getting an Honest Wargamer tattoo the other day on his ass, which I won't reveal who that was, but more love to him.
I guess I know which bit could be the O.
Yes. Problem is, I know the gentleman in. There's no way that ass isn't covered in hair, so it might be a waste of time. Well, so thanks everyone for joining us. Stream Street Day 31, unique in a couple of ways. Number one, it's the first time. It's our first day in the 30s, or second day in the 30s. Oh fuck knows. It's a long time, which is exciting. Thank you for joining us wherever you've joined us. Also, thank you to everyone on the podcast. Please stay hydrated, drink all your water, and stay nice and healthy. And thanks to everyone on the Honest Wargamer Patreon. There we go. That's all the party announcements out of the way. But the Patreon guys genuinely are fucking radical. So, and if you have joined us live, which is also my second favourite group of people, with the podcasters being third, and it's not because I don't like them, it's just I don't get to see them react, and that upsets me. I want them to like swear at me or say something, so I feel like we're connected more. So if you'd like to just find me on Twitter and say rude things to me, please do, podcast dudes. It would cheer me up. Right, well, today's also a unique day because, Rob, you're here to talk about Mantic Games, and obviously it's absolutely fine. Most people will say that we cover both AOS and 40k, and not enough 40k, more AOS. So being able to talk to someone who runs a different company, does different things, is really exciting for me. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. So thanks for being on the show.
My
But
pleasure.
could we just introduce yourself? What do you do there? Like, what is Mantic?
Oh, so Mantic is a miniatures company and a board games company as well. So we do things like The Walking Dead, Hellboy, Kings of War, Dead Zone, a lot of different games, really. And I am well, it depends on which day of the week it is. I have many different roles, but generally, I'm the kind of community manager, I guess. So I do a lot of our live streams, podcasts, and that kind of stuff as well.
Okay, good. And how do you find that as a job? Obviously, like relating to your audience and being the head of your community.
Yeah, I really, really enjoy it actually because ultimately we're all big nerds, surely. So it's just an opportunity to speak to other nerds about kind of projects you're working on, and find out different ways to engage with everyone. I guess that's the difficulty, isn't it? Kind of finding ways that people want to kind of engage with the company or engage with us as kind of individuals as well. And it's always fun to kind of, whether that's live streaming games or doing the podcast, we're always trying to find different ways to kind of talk to people and reach out to new audiences as well. So this is why this is great to kind of speak to some people who may not have heard of us or may have heard of us and not kind of necessarily looked at the miniature or looked at the games.
Yeah, I think those are fair points. I mean, I'm very excited to find out what it is you do, and some of the approaches you're going through, especially during this very interesting time. Big shout out to Trog. Thanks so very much for subscribing. He says, Trog say, good job, Rob, on continuing the stream streak. Thanks, Trog. I appreciate that loads. Right, so before we get into any of that, like, how did you enter wargaming? Like, how did you start in the hobby?
So I guess this is a typical story that you've probably heard quite a lot. I started with Hero Quest back one Christmas. So what year was it? Was it 91, something like that? Hero Quest came out. I got it for Christmas. First kind of game I'd really had like that, and was just immediately besotted by goblins. Fell in love with them. I grew up in Grimsby, so I kind of luckily I escaped. I live in Nottingham now, but in Grimsby we didn't have a Games Workshop, but we had a shop called Hewins, which was like a model shop that sold everything from model railways to airfix kits, and then tucked away, hidden in the corner, was all kind of their Games Workshop stuff. And I just went in there and immediately spent all my Christmas money on all the goblins I could, and that's really how it started. So I got into Warhammer Fantasy, played that a lot. There wasn't really a big scene, I guess, back then. It was just a few of me and my mates, Harry Sanderson, a guy called Craig Charles, not the Craig Charles, I hasten to add.
That would be great, though. He's a
I
great
know that
DJ
would.
also. Did you know that?
I've seen because he's on Six Music. Is it on Six Music and things
Yeah,
like that? Yeah,
he's great live.
that story would have been a lot better actually if it was going down.
Should have just carried on. I would not said. Does he
Yeah,
mean
I'll
the
leave that in.
great Charles? Yeah.
And I used to live next door to someone called Andrew Murray, and I'll just pretend that's the tennis guy as well. So there we go. So Chris and Andrew Murray were my friends. Um, so yeah, I played loads of fantasy for quite a lot of years, and then I guess like a lot of people, kind of fell out of kind of playing when I went to university. Stopped playing, discovered that I could spend all my money on beer instead of models, and started doing that. And had a massive gap, probably about 15 years. And it was completely by accident that I kind of stumbled back into the hobby. It was, I guess I'd always been interested in the video games. I'd been playing Blood Bowl quite a bit on the video games and uh, Dawn of War. So I'd always been interested, I guess, but never really got around to getting the miniature side of things. Read a lot of the Gotrek and Felix books as well. So I'd been around the hobby, just not actively involved in playing, I guess. But then I was working for a magazine about collecting old toys, bizarrely. And as part of that, we did a lot about toy soldiers. And so, of course, when you write about, and that was Britain's like the big like lead ones,
Mm.
and then kind of accidentally stumbled back into it. Kind of started looking more at the models and heard about Mantic actually when I was down at Hornby, bizarrely, because they were looking at doing a deal where they would distribute Mantic products. So they had a load of stuff there, heard about them, found out they were in Nottingham, and then it was a slippery slope back into the hobby actually then pretty quick.
Yeah, I think once you're in, like, no matter what age you decide you're going to leave for a bit, it eventually drags you all the way back. That's why I'm just not going to take a break. I'm just going to plow on through
I
until,
think that's the best way,
yeah,
yeah.
until the loving
Yeah, because when I got
go on.
so when I got back into it, it was like I said to Heather, my wife, I was like, oh, I'll only need like one shelf under the stairs. And then it was like, oh, I probably just need another shelf. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just have the cupboard under the stairs. Oh, I need a cupboard upstairs now. And it quickly expanded. But I suppose what I loved is when I got back into it, is I joined a local club in Nottingham and then was just completely blown away by the scope of all the different games. You know, I went to the first club night and people were playing X-Wing, they were playing War Machine, they were playing 40K. And that just blew my mind because I think when I was into it, when I used to play when I was little, it was mainly just Warhammer Fantasy of 40K. And so that actually led me to start a magazine as well. I started a magazine called Tabletop Gaming, which is still going, just because I thought it'd be good to have a magazine about the entire hobby, really.
And I think that's a super fair point because, like, my entrance in, if you don't mind me regaling you with it, and the Twitch chat probably be bored of it by now, but I think it's actually slightly different. Well, it's definitely very different to yours, but it is definitely one of the ways in which I would like to explore other games more in the future. Like I told you before we were off air. But before I do that, I just need to say a big shout out to Justin over in South Africa, who says greetings from South Africa. Just popped in to say hi. I've been loving the stream street. Perfect listen for whilst hobbying. So I'm glad we can do that for you, Justin. Big love to you, and also big love to Owen, Hook and Pin. I see you all joined in the chat, and the Hobby Hobo. Kia ora to you. So my way in was my friend came over. I'm also based in Nottingham, and my friend came over to my house. We played some tabletop Warhammer for the first time. We then just drove over to Warhammer World, which is at that point 10 minutes from my house. Is still 10 minutes from where I live now. I went in, and this was before they had the big refurb, so I was like, you know, this is kind of cool. Like, the castle bit was cool, but the museum at that point was, like, embarrassing. But we won't talk about that. And that was my entrance, and from that point on, I would go regularly on a Wednesday there. So that was my local gaming club, if you will. But actually, one of the things that I regret now, and one of the things that I'm going to do when the lockdown is over, is either join or be a part of a local gaming club where many game systems are played, because I've obviously met people from all around the world, and unless you're just centric to Nottingham and you happen to just go to Games Workshop, which was my path, and obviously not yours, there are loads of options. When you go to your local gaming club, people are, like you say, they're playing X-Wing, they're playing board games, they're playing Magic, they're doing all sorts of stuff. But that didn't happen for me in the early days, so I'm really looking for a game club or something like that in Nottingham. Like, I'm very jealous of the guys in London and the Bad Moon Cafe, the way that they could do a whole bunch of different things. So yeah, that was a different journey for me. So this is exciting for me to learn about some stuff. I'm looking forward to talking to some other companies in the future as well, just finding things out. So yeah, that's a cool little journey. And was it the variety that you enjoyed seeing when you were at these clubs?
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, it's incredibly dangerous for your wallet because you'll go in one week and you'll go in like people are playing say X-wing. You'll be like, oh, I'm definitely going to get into X-wing, and then you might start set, and the next week someone will be playing Guild Ball, and you'll be going, oh my god, Guild Ball looks amazing. I'll start doing that. So you do end up jumping around, I guess, a lot more from different gaming systems, just because there are ultimately so many cool games out there. You know, I've got so many start sets for things like Bushido or like Guild Ball and all sorts of different things. But it is a great way to just see what's out there and see how they work as well. And then obviously, if you work for a gaming company, you can kind of say, okay, well, maybe we can have a look at that and do something similar in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I also am still waiting on my Guild Ball starter set. When I was doing the live stream for Games Workshop at Adepticon, we were on the front page of Twitch. We had like 3 or 4 thousand people watching, and I ended the show saying, "I meant to say, don't forget to go and check out the Blood Bowl stand. What I said was, don't forget to go and check out the Guild Ball stand." And then just fucking turned the stream off, and I was like, oh, and I'm still waiting for Guild Ball to send me my free set, if I'm honest with you. Like, that wasn't a deal we prearranged. It was obviously just a fuck up on my part, but...
I've got one in the garage. I'll send you one.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk Mantic Games. So obviously Mantic Games is a game company, but this is for you to start telling us what you do, what goes on there.
Yeah, so Mantic's been around for about 10 years and was actually set up by Ronnie Renton, who was ex Games Workshop, was like one of the head honchos over there quite a long time ago now. So I think he left Games Workshop about 15 years ago, set up Mantic. And originally the idea is that Mantic was to make affordable fantasy miniatures or sci-fi miniatures, I guess as alternatives to Games Workshop ones as well. From there, it kind of expanded into making actual games. So one of the first ones was Kings of War, which was kind of the mass fantasy battle game. So a bit like Warhammer Fantasy, but streamlined a bit, so it was a bit quicker to play. So instead of taking an afternoon, you could quite easily get a decent game in around 2 hours. So Kings of War was the first kind of big success, I guess, for Mantic. And then I think one of the things that kind of propelled that kind of more into the mainstream was obviously when Age of Sigmar came along. Warhammer Fantasy notoriously got blown up, and the old world, or the world that was, got blown up. So it meant there was all of a sudden, from it being kind of second best to Warhammer Fantasy, it was suddenly the only kind of mass fantasy battle game out there. So you saw a lot of people come across from fantasy and start playing Kings of War. So that was really good, and it kind of helped that to grow and release more factions and do more armies. So Kings of War is probably the game that most people have heard of. But then we do other things as well. So we've got the Walking Dead All Out War. That's obviously based on the comics for The Walking Dead. And that's more.
As I understand, John's been briefing me. It's specifically based on the comics, not on the show.
That's right. Yeah. So it's based. So you won't find. I was going to call him Dylan. He's not Dylan, is he? It's the guy with the crossbow. He's one of the famous guys in the Walking. Anyway, Dwayne. Someone will remember. I keep getting characters confused with Tiger King. That's a problem at the minute.
Listen, if you're about to tell me live on air that you're doing the Tiger King franchise, I'll lose my whole shit. Yeah.
Oh my god, I think that'd be such a. Imagine that you're going to run the zoo, a board game running the zoo of Tiger King would be fantastic.
Absolutely, while trying to stay on meth or off meth, like you keep trying to get new lovers who are husbands but they're straight.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole story, there's a whole game there. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm super excited.
Anyway, weirdly. That is so weird. I was thinking about this yesterday when I was thinking about Tiger King, thinking what an amazing game it would be. Because you've got like games like Zoo's Cartoon or something, or Dinosaur Island. Yeah, you kind of swap it all on its head and change it around. But anyway, we have got totally sidetracked there. So, you got The Walking Dead All Out War, which is a skirmish game. So set in the world. So it's all about the kind of battle for supplies. And then you've got the kind of zombies, the walkers. And they're a bit like, they're controlled by an AI system, and it's a bit like scenery that bites. It kind of they walk around. Sometimes they don't get in the way. So that's a cool one. Very apt, I guess, for these times. You can play that solo as well, so that's been quite popular.
What, The Walking Dead?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've got quite a number of solo play games, actually, which has been really good at the minute, and we've seen a lot of people picking those up. And then you've got a load of other games as well, like sci-fi. You've got Dead Zone, which is a skirmish game. Warpath, which is like the big kind of Armageddon style sci-fi game as well. Vanguard, which is the fantasy kind of the skirmish version of Kings of War. So I guess one of the problems with Kings of War or fantasy kind of mass battle games in particular is, although as a spectacle they're amazing, when you've got your 200 miniatures lined up on the table, it can be quite a bit daunting. So I think we've tried to make it easier to get into the universes of like Kings of War or Warpath with skirmish games like that. So Vanguard is a good example of a skirmish game where you only need 10, 15 figures, but then you can scale it up to kind of Kings of War if you get hooked on it as well.
All right. So can I ask some questions about some of those games because I'm quite interested.
Yeah.
Number one, are there any tigers? Now you've got me on a thing.
Yes. Yes, there are. There are tigers. Yeah, All Out War. You've got Shiva, who is Ezekiel's pet tiger.
Yes, so excited. Okay, no, in seriousness. So Kings of War is I think sword and board or rank and flank. That's the one of the so it's square bases, right? With
Yes.
regiments.
That's right.
Before we get onto the game mechanics, could you tell me some of the background for Kings of War? Like, is there like a living world in which it's inside of?
Yeah, so I mean that was one of the big changes. We released third edition last October. I think when Kings of War first came out, it was literally just a pamphlet of about 10 pages, just with the rules on. So over the years, we've been trying to expand that the universe and make it a bit more interesting. So I think there's about 200 pages of fluff in the latest book, which is really good because it just kind of gives it a bit more of an identity. I think that's a problem we sometimes I think struggled with is to make it a clear identity and to make the mantic stuff different to traditional fantasy tropes as well. So we kind of started to move that along. So yeah, there is a living, breathing world. It's set in Panathor. The main kind of enemy, I guess, is like the Abyss. So that's they're kind of like demons that kind of roam around the world. They're kind of the people fighting against them is the Basileans. They're the
So
heroic.
the Abyss are like okay, so they're the bad guys.
Yeah, kind of. But I mean, they're the main bad guys. So they a lot of stuff spins off from them. So we had a big online campaign about 3 years ago, I think it was now. And it's because the Abyss was growing. So all the evil guys were like, hey, this is wicked. We can use all this evil magic. So they are often the antagonists for a lot of stuff. And they've got like you've got the forces of the Abyss, which is their main ones. You've got the abyssal dwarfs, which are like naughty dwarfs who end up like celebrating the Abyss.
Now you're talking about language. Yeah,
Yeah,
some chaos dwarves.
naughty dwarfs.
Yeah, naughty
So
dwarves. All right.
we just need to add tigers to them. We've got you hooked.
Yeah, you also need rednecks. But
Okay. We'll see what redneck tiger dwarfs. We'll see what we can do. So yeah, we are trying to make it a living kind of breathing world. So Edge of the Abyss, when we did that campaign, that actually affected stuff that is now in third edition. The plan is, or hopefully, if things return to normal, for us to do another campaign this year, and then that will move the story on again. So we're kind of quite keen. We want people to feel like they can affect the world and change events, or even potentially kill characters off as well. So that's been quite fun.
yeah, so you want the community to like infect the game effectively.
Yeah, and we do that with Dead Zone as well. We had a Dead Zone campaign 2 years ago, and that was based on a new faction called the Nameless, who were like these squid dudes. They came along, and it was a choice of okay, will they be predominantly bad or will they be predominantly good? And they tend up being quite bad. So from now on, they're going to be more kind of antagonistic against the other races and things like that within the world, which is quite fun. And it's a good way to the community to get involved and to get engaged with the games and feel like they can have an influence on what happens.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. Is the with that being the narrative and it affecting, I want to come back to that as well because like uh, how do you do like organized play with it? Like, and can you do organized play? Because obviously one of the things we cover on the show a lot is competitive gaming, with the intent of working towards something like T-Sports or an esports style idea. Where, for me, I think, and one of the big tenets of wargaming for me, I really enjoy the background. It informs all of my games. I enjoy fun games as well. But I do like the idea that it's a game. It's like chess, but not like chess. But it's
Yeah.
me and my opponent attempting to match skills against each other. What do you think of that? Like, do you guys support that, or is that not something you support?
Oh no, totally, 100%. I mean, Kings of War has been kind of one of the really big kind of tournament games. That probably well, actually, it is our biggest tournament game. So we have a big tournament at the end of the year, Clash of Kings. Last year we had just over 100 players for that one. We did it at Element, the Northwest Gaming Centre. This year it's hopefully going to be at Cardiff, Firestorm Games, assuming that everything kind of gets back to normal. But yeah, organized play, I think, is a really, really big part of gaming because it does kind of propel you to get more and more into the hobby, I think, as well, because it will be a case if you want to paint up that unit because you're going to a tournament. And for Kings of War, obviously, until we all went in lockdown, there's probably actually a tournament, probably at least every other weekend somewhere in the country. So the tournament scene's pretty massive for that one, probably our biggest game, and in America and Europe as well. So yeah, we do try and support organized play as much as possible. We do organized play packs with like different prizes in and that sort of stuff. So,
Could you explain that to me? Because that's quite interesting.
so what we'll do is if you're organizing a tournament, you can buy a tournament pack from our website, and then it'll come with some special one-off tokens. We did it with Vanguard as well, so that you can only get if you go to a tournament and you win at that tournament. And then next time you turn up, you'll hopefully have those tokens, and it gives you kind of bragging rights to say, "Look, I've got these tokens. I'm a badass. You need to be scared of me. I'm almost certainly going to table you." So yeah, we kind of want to encourage people to do tournaments as well, and we will give price support to try and get people out there as well.
I think that's one of the interesting things is watching a company like support its own competitive play,
Yeah,
which I think is a great thing. Truth be told, and something that I obviously would like to see more generally from most companies. Although I think quite a few companies do try quite hard.
yeah, I think most do now. Yeah,
But I think there's the I don't know how you feel about this. I feel like this is true. This is just an off-the-wall question, but I feel like most wargamers have some sort of shame about the fact that we're wargamers. It's one of the things that I definitely don't agree with. I'm like, wear it on your chest, like paint you. Don't just go to the pub. Go to the pub with your mates and do some painting. Like, just hang. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think we should push it out there as something that, because I think it's an incredibly positive hobby. Whichever game system or models you're painting or building, I think it's one of the most positive things you could do. And I think going to tournaments and meeting up with people and playing games is one of the most progressive things you could do. You're meeting people you don't know, you're having conversations. I think that's all really, really good. So it's really nice to see you guys supporting that. Have you got any future plans for that, or is that one of the things you're just going to continue doing?
I think we'll continue doing. But it's interesting you say. I think the great thing about tournaments is they're a safe space, I guess, for you to kind of geek out with your friends. And it's interesting at the minute with the lockdown. I think we've all been trying to find different ways to replicate that. I think
Yeah.
some people really struggle that they can't go to their tournament and be a nerd for that weekend. So I personally have been taking part in like Discord chats on like a Friday night or whatever, just to have a conversation with people about nerdy stuff because you won't just talk miniatures, you'll end up talking about Tiger King or Mandalorian or all sorts of things as you're on the call, which is really good. And I think it's interesting to see how this hobby is helping people to cope at the minute. You know, the amount of people who have started to go, okay, well, I'm going to finish this hobby project just to give me something to concentrate on while I am locked in at home. So yeah, I think the more we can do to support that, whether that's through tournaments or we have gaming clubs here on a Friday night, or we used to, and on a Saturday we're open all day for people to come in and just drop in and play games. So yeah, we'll definitely 100% continue to kind of support people, whether it's gaming clubs just wanting to do introductory days. We have like Pathfinders who are volunteers and they kind of go out into the community, into different stores to do demos. So I think we'll definitely continue that and carry on doing tournaments as well.
So Good. One of my very great friends has just turned up in the chat, Mr. Jonathan Etland, and has just said, "Mantic sweet. I played Kings of War Second Edition. It was a really good game." And let me tell you, if it wasn't, he'd let you know. Also, love you, John. Miss you loads. So, talk to me about, because you've done something new last week or just this week for Kings of War, for people.
Yeah, so we've just released the free rules for Kings of War Third Edition. So the game came out last October and has been really well received. It's always a bit nerve-wracking when you release a new edition because you think, oh my God, if you get it wrong, people are just going to not play it anymore. But actually, the response has been really good. Um, so we kind of let that bed down, let the community bed down, and then this week we just thought, well, although it's a bit weird, obviously people can't game at the minute, apart from if you do it online with like Vassal or Tabletop Simulator. It's actually a really good time to start planning your army or to start a new project, like I mentioned. So we thought, well, actually, why don't we do the free rules now? People can see how it works, see, okay, well, actually, this sounds like a really good game. I'm going to give this a go once everything's over. But I don't know if you're like me, I don't like to play with unpainted miniatures. So some people might be like, well, I don't want to play until I've got an army painted.
We're from completely different worlds. Like, painting for me is the tax. Like, for me, the mechanics, which I know is not something I can really ask you about on the stream, so I'm not going to go into it. But mechanics are what excite me. Interactivity. One of the things that we talk about a lot at the minute when we review books or the rules, which I know, like, compared to painters, like a guy's like, look at this painting, you're like, that's objectively beautiful. And rules design, I think, has got its own integral beauty that really plays out when two people are having a great time. And one of the things that I think that we talk about a lot over game balance on the show, at least, and I know the audience do as well, is we talk about the level of interactivity. So, like, if you're playing against an army in any game system and it's uninteractive, like if there's no back and forth, it isn't in any way interesting. You know, some of the more classic games, if you think of chess or Go, it's you go, I go, one thing. Like, so it's always interactive to a degree. Whereas sometimes tabletop games can verge into uninteractive, and I think that's a massive negative. And I'd much prefer interactive games that are imbalanced to uninteractive games that are balanced, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't.
So I think kind of Kings of War is more traditional in terms of that sense. Is, you know, you move all your army, and then the next person moves all their army. But I suppose one of the kind of good things is because it is quite quick to play because everything's multi-based. You don't have to worry about removing all the miniatures when you do wounds. So actually, it is quite quick. So there's not a lot of downtime. Because I see what you mean. You know, that is one of the worst things is when you're just stood watching your opponent just do all their stuff and potentially even wipe out your units, and you're like, oh, I can't really do much. So we try and make it as quick as possible. So at least that sad time when you're watching your favorite hero get knifed in the back, at least it's over quite quick, and then you can take revenge, hopefully.
Yeah, well, but that for me is because I'm having ideas a mile a minute, and I have my good friend Darren on the show and a bunch of other people. And you might not know these guys, and that's fine. But when we come up with great army list ideas or we have fun with it, it's then the horror show of the idea that I have to then paint them. Because my next idea is only 5 minutes away, but the painted army is not 5 minutes away.
Yeah. I suppose that's why skirmish games do so well at the minute, because at least the skirmish game you can bang out potentially a kill team or a faction or a war band in a week or two, and then so by the time you do have another idea, actually it's not going to take you that long to kind of do a new one.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's why things like X-Wing exploded really in popularity. You know, with pre-painted miniatures, you pick it up out of the box. You have to have no hobby skill. Your plane is going to look as good as the other planes, and then you're just playing. So I think there's a lot to be said for that as well. But obviously, those are different things. But we were talking about the Kings of War rules, so
sorry,
it's okay.
Easily to get us distracted.
No, so you were saying you release. You don't like. You were saying you've put some out for free. Is that right?
Yeah. So the idea is this is a taste of. So you'll learn the core mechanics. Basically, you'll learn how to move, how to shoot, and how to punch each other in the face with weapons. So you can kind of look at that and go, oh yeah, actually this game is for me. I like the way it works. I kind of understand it now. So then it's kind of a case of, okay, well now I'm going to put together my army ready for when we come out of lockdown, so you can go to your local club and play then. So we thought, actually, this is probably a good time. Keep people busy as well. I think over the past few weeks, we've been trying to release free rules for everyone. So we've done a lot of free solo play rules. So we did like Walking Dead. We did a whole expansion which gives you AI for another kind of band of survivors. So if you are stuck at home, you can just play against those. So we did that the other week, and then things like what else did we do? Dead Zone. We did an entire expansion for that, so people could play that at home, just so they can get their gaming fix and not get bored. I guess that's the main thing. But yeah, with Kings of War, we thought, well, we'll do it now so that you can prepare your army, get it built, get it painted. Or I guess one of the beauties of Kings of War is if you did want to use an existing fantasy army, you can rebase it on like one of the big like, movement trays, and then you're ready to go with that as well, pretty quick.
That's cool. That's really cool. So some free rules. So like, how's the company doing during the lockdown? Are you guys still open? Are you still working? Like, what's been happening?
Yeah, so the website is still open, so we're still shipping orders. We're on a reduced staff, so we've got quite a big warehouse that pretty much means that everyone can have their own space. So we're following all the kind of different guidelines, going above and beyond. So everyone's wearing masks and things like that. We because we're not as big as some of the other guys out there. I mean, there's only just over 20 of us in the UK office. So the warehouse is down to about 5 people. So they've all been working. And then the rest of us are all at home and are working from home. Or, I've come in, well, up from my bedroom, obviously.
Obviously.
But yeah, and so it's been weird. It's been odd, obviously, because, normally we have gaming nights here on a Friday night. So we've kind of missed out on that. Or we just started to open up more as well in the store so that people could come in throughout the week and start playing. And that was just getting going. And then, unfortunately, we had to stop it all and put it on pause.
That's a huge shame. I've just had some questions in the chat for you, if you don't mind answering
Yeah,
those
yeah,
before we
sure.
move on anymore. But Scriver's put the link in the chat to that if you guys want to check out the rules. I think it's actually before I ask, oh no, I'll ask these questions and then I'll ask. No, my question takes precedent because because it does.
There's a hierarchy.
No, it's just more before we get into the next bit. How open do you feel you guys are as a company to the community? Because I think that's one of the I watch a lot of The American Office, and obviously,
Yeah,
how does Dunder Mifflin, that's you guys in this case, compete with Staples? And obviously, it's customer service, right? It's your connection with the community.
yeah.
For me, obviously, the name of the show, I feel like honesty is the key tenet of having a good relationship with people. Do you guys find that? Obviously, you're going to say yes, but do you actually actively work very hard to be very transparent about what you do?
We, I mean, yes, we do try. I think I think one thing we struggle with is sometimes people think we're a lot bigger than we are. So it's sometimes hard because most of the time the person engaging with the community is me. Typically, it'll be me on Twitter or Facebook or kind of YouTube and all the different things. Sometimes it's quite hard if I'm not around. I can't respond. But yeah, generally we do try and engage with the community as much as possible. Obviously, we do Kickstarters. We haven't done a Kickstarter for a while, but that's often a very much a two-way street, that one, because we'll often be taking feedback during the Kickstarter. And if people want to see different things, we'll try and adapt the plans to fit those things. But generally, with things like Kings of War, we have a rules committee which is separate to Mantic. So they are a group of volunteers, and they take feedback as well from the community, and that potentially gets implemented into the rules. So as much as possible, we try and embrace the community, take on their ideas, because it can help to shape the games and develop them as well. But yeah, I think it's important to be open and honest, and I think that's one thing that Mantic's done for quite a while. It was always a case that we wanted to try and engage with the community as much as possible, particularly in the early days of Mantic when Games Workshop wasn't. And I think that was one of the big distinguishing features. And then obviously now they've got Warhammer Community, they've got a huge team. So I think everyone's going to realise that, yeah, the community is an important part of what we do, really.
Yeah, but being a part, they're not the most honest community leaders, and I think that that's a fair statement. And that's not. I'm not involving you in that conversation. That's just my.
No, no.
That's just my statement. And as much as I love the games that they make, I feel like they could be better. And so it's nice to hear that some of the smaller companies, especially, are focusing on that, because I think it's actually really integral. Because where people might lose faith in some, wargaming no matter which game system you play, it's still a big family of people. And if you're disenfranchised because a corporation isn't being particularly nice, as long as there are some other smaller outfits that are doing something nice, I think that's great.
Yeah, because I think we really rely on the community to get out there. And, the reason why I heard of Mantic and got into it is because I went to the club and there was a guy there that loved Mantic and showed me Kings of War and was like, oh, now let's play Dreadball. And he was really enthusiastic about it. So I think sometimes that's what we need more, is that we need the people to go out there and kind of be, what's the word, kind of, I guess, ambassadors, I guess, for our games in their local club, because we haven't necessarily got the resources to do everything that we'd like to in some ways.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, so some questions that we've had in the chat. One from Dave Fraser. What is Mantic model that is closest equivalent to a Saurus Knight? If you don't, do you know what a Saurus Knight is?
Yeah. I guess it's a salamander.
Okay, there you go. There's a salamander. I'll try and find it. Let's go.
Oh, actually, no, are the Saurus Knights the mounted ones?
Yeah.
No, we haven't got any mounted ones, actually. We've only got the salamanders, which are the troops.
You got no dinosaurs riding dinosaurs?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Do you have a store that is usually open to learn the rules? So sorry again.
Yeah, so like I said, before we kind of had the lockdown, we just opened up Mantic HQ throughout the week and at the weekend as well. And that was good because we had people coming in. And yeah, if you want to come in, we would normally have tables set up. So if you fancied kind of giving Kings of War a go, Elvis, who is our customer service guy and who also runs our shop, he's on hand to kind of take you through the games and show you. Elvis, yes. Yeah.
You've convinced me already. But I have a question for you. Like, I don't know. I imagine you don't hire the guy, so we're gonna create a different company to Mantic right now. You and me are in charge of it, right? We're in a boardroom meeting right now. You, me, and the Twitch chat. We need some people on as our frontline staff. My question to you is, my frontline store member, do I want that to be a pretty regular dude? Yeah. All right. Or do I want that to be a really fucking weird dude? Because my answer is weird as hell.
I think, yeah, it definitely helps because, I mean, well,
I'm not saying Elvis is weird, by the way. I don't know Elvis. Elvis is probably just super normal with a very cool name.
I was going to say the people they're meeting are probably weird too.
Me.
They obviously need to be relatable to the community. I think it helps. I mean, we've obviously Elvis. I think you need to be enthusiastic. So, and that can sometimes come across as weird. But yeah, I think as long as you're enthusiastic about the games, it doesn't matter how weird you are, really.
I think the weirder the better, personally. MJ Pegasus says, Elvin going to teach you about the King of War. Question over on YouTube from Justin. Biggest challenge for new games is player retention after initial release. Being directly involved with game development, how do you plan for that, especially in a world with entrenched competition?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is super difficult, and it's often really hard for us to get our voice heard, I guess, sometimes as well, because, like you say, there is one huge kind of company in the market, and when they whisper, it kind of drowns out everyone else. So we're having to kind of shout all the time to get heard above those whispers. So it's been quite interesting at the minute is that actually we've had a little bit of space to talk to people that we don't. I mean, obviously, like yourself, we haven't spoken in the past. There's been a great opportunity actually during this kind of time that we've seen a lot of new people coming in, just kind of sniffing around and going, okay, well, there's nothing going on at the minute. I'll have a look around and look at some new stuff. So again, that's another reason for doing the free rules at the minute. But yeah, I think with player retention, I think we try and obviously make the games as good as we can. I think that's, and everyone tries to do that. The worst thing you can do is release a load of crap. But
True.
I think making sure that the games are easy to get into, I think that's one of the things of Kings of War. If you see someone playing, it can look a bit daunting when you've got 200, 300 miniatures on the tabletop. But actually, it's very, very straightforward and easy to play. And I think that's something with things like goes to The Walking Dead, goes to Dead Zone, all those games, we try and make them as simple as possible to get into, so that hopefully you've learnt the rules by possibly the end of turn 2. So then you know it, and then you're like, okay, well, now I can look at doing different things. And then in terms of retention, it's just making sure there's relatively kind of regular releases or new rules or updates as well, because we all like new stuff. We all like the new shiny products. So as long as we kind of keep people up to date with that, I think it encourages people to come on and know that we're supporting it as well. I think that's the big thing, is to make sure that people know that we like a game and we support it. Therefore, we're not going to bin it off in a couple of years. We're going to keep on going, or keep on going back to it. And even if it's not necessarily releasing free rules, it might be having a tournament here or releasing something else to do with it as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Good answer. So Dave Fraser says, "What is the best feature of the Mantic Kings of War armies, and why is it the diorama unit basing?" Yeah.
Oh, so multi-basing, that's a really interesting one, because you're not removing the miniatures, it means that each unit has got, so each regiment or troop has got a set base size. So, so normally like small infantry is 20 by 20 on a square base. So that would be whatever that is for a regiment. Hang on, I've got the book here. I can quickly check. So, for example, if you've got an normal infantry, they have a footprint for a regiment of 100 millimeters by 80 millimeters. So you always know it's going to be that. So that means the height doesn't matter or anything. So you can arrange the miniatures on that base however you want. So that's led to some really creative stuff where people do basically these mini dioramas. So it looks a bit more dynamic when you're pushing them around the tabletop, because it could be, a load of ogres charging through a fence ready to smash someone in the face, or some undead kind of coming up from graves. So we've seen that's been a really popular bit of Kings of War, is that people can be very creative and do their own stuff and make an army look very distinct from someone else's undead army.
Yeah, I think that's that for me actually is a really interesting element of looking at you guys as a company, because there's two worlds in the Warhammer world, in my opinion. There is the company world, where obviously if you play at Games Workshop HQ or any of their affiliate Pleasant for Plastic chaps events, then you end up having to fulfill some sort of weird requirements. And then there's the independent scene, and the independent scene has always been like very like encouraging of creativity and this. And it's nice to hear you guys as a company. You're like, oh well, I won't sell another 10 dudes for the back line of this. Instead, we'll encourage people to be creative in our hobby. That's actually sounds genuinely quite exciting. It's quite nice as well to hear that encouragement, right?
Yeah, and I mean that's something we've always said. I mean, obviously, we want people to buy our miniatures because that's how we stay in business. But actually, if people want to play Kings of War with an old fantasy army, we've always kind of said, well, look, pop them off their old bases, put them on a multi-base, and you're ready to go. I mean, and in something like Uncharted Empires, which is a supplement for Kings of War, we've got army lists there for models that we don't make, might not even plan to make. And that was originally from second edition. That was to make sure you could use your lizard men, your warriors of chaos, that kind of thing or Skaven as well in Kings of War. But now they're called Ratkin, Varangur, or Salamanders. So I mean, we've got no problem with people turning up even to our official events using kind of third-party products. And we kind of encourage that creativity, that if you've come to an event with a really nice army, we're not going to turn you away. And also one of the beauties of multi-basing is, like you say, although we say, well, look, a unit should have 20 miniatures, actually, if you've done a really nice base, then it can have 15 miniatures or, a little bit more. Some people even go and say, well, I'm going to put more miniatures on the base because I want it to look really dynamic. So, we always we'll always do that. And I don't think there'll ever be a time when we stop people being creative or stop people coming in from different communities and giving it a go.
That's great. That's actually a really positive thing to hear, actually. Really refreshing as well. Okay, so that's fun. And then, questions. I don't want to have missed anyone's questions, otherwise I'm the dick at that point. I mean, already that's the case, but I just don't want to make sure I miss any. Sorry again says, my local club is down the road from Mantic HQ. Is there any way to get someone to demo the game? Says sorry again.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, we've got the Pathfinders, so what we can do is we can get one of the Pathfinders to come on. It might even turn out there's a Pathfinder in your area, or if you're just down the road, it may be that we turn up and are happy to do a demo. We'll often kind of pop out to kind of see people and do demos, whether it's at shows or at local clubs as well.
Well, yeah. Speaking as an English fella, and having travelled to America, Canada, Australia over the past couple of years doing live coverage, I think anyone in England who doesn't think every one of our cities is just down the road is at this stage taking the piss a bit. Like when I don't,
it amazes me. Yeah, it amazes me. We we have like Clash of Kings this year, which is in Cardiff, and people are like, "Oh, Cardiff, that's way too far." You're like, "Are you joking?" You know, America travel on planes with their armies in cases for a weekend event, and you're like, "Oh, well, I'm going to go 3 hours. It's to Cardiff." So unless you've got something really against Wales, which I think that would be a bit terrible as well.
Fair.
There's absolutely no excuse to go, no excuse not to go to any event. I mean, I was looking at going to one in Bristol in January, and it was going to be like a nice 5 a.m. start for me. But it's what you do. It's if you like the hobby, I think a drive to somewhere shouldn't be putting you off.
No, I would agree with you absolutely. I think I think that's fair. All right, so there's also a skirmish version of Kings of War. Am I right?
Yeah, so Vanguard came out. Oh my God, that came out 2018. And the idea of that was we thought, well, some people might be interested in Kings of War. They might have seen some of the miniatures, but the kind of idea of doing that big kind of 200 model army might put them off. So instead, you've got Vanguard, which is kind of a narrative-driven skirmish game. So there are different scenarios in there, from like oh, finding the plans, the secret plans from like a spy that's been killed, to much bigger scenarios where it's like capturing a giant. So you're two war bands desperately trying to hack and slash at this massive giant that's stomping around on the tabletop, getting in your way. And the idea is as well, it ties into Kings of War. So if you want, you can play a game of Vanguard, and that will actually affect your next game of Kings of War. So, for example, in that giant scenario, if you catch the giant, you'll get that giant for free in your next game of Kings of War. So that was really good, and that's been really popular actually. I mean, it's one of the most popular kind of. And again, the rules for that are free on the website. So if you want to have a look, you can see how it all works. And again, there's different war bands in that. So we've got Ratkin, we're a bit like Skaven and Empire of Dust and all those kind of ones as well. So again, you can try it out with any miniatures you've got. You just need to pop them onto a square base, and away you go.
Okay, so you might not know this, but I have a long standing hatred of the word skirmish. It's not that I'm against.
Okay.
It's not that I'm against skirmish games in any way. I think they're actually really positive. I think I'd like to get into playing a bit of Kill Team and some other stuff at some point. But
Yeah.
truth be told, it's something you might not be aware of, but. The word skirmish just triggers me, and everyone in the chat knows why.
I'll say it's a smaller game. It's a smaller warband-based game.
That's fine, as long as it's not ever actually skirmishes. That's cool with me.
I guess that, like I say, the term skirmish is an interesting one, because I think people now bandy that around because it's I think it's what's the name, shorthand for this is a game that's going to be easier to get into. So you kind of, here's skirmish. It means you only need a handful of models, and away you go. I think that's possibly why the kind of term gets used so much. But yeah, we just kind of wanted to make a game that was slightly more accessible for people who wanted to give it a go but didn't want to do a massive army.
Yeah, I think that's a really smart way of going into it. I really do. We touched earlier on about the narrative. I'd like to ask a couple of questions. Obviously, you've put the rules for free to download on the site, which is great.
Yeah.
Does it work in the Games Workshop style where there's a main core rule book and then I go and buy supplementary books, or is there just a main rule book? And then also, is all of the narrative in there, or are there other sources of narrative?
So no, there's no like codexes or battle tomes, anything like that. It's a case of that big Kings of War hardback rulebook. I think it's about 400 pages, something like that. That contains all the lore for all the history of Panathor, which is where it's set, and it contains all the history of all the factions as well. So if you get that book, you can learn about everything. It won't be that you turn up to an event and you don't know who the Abyssal Dwarfs are and what they do, or that kind of thing. So yeah, we kind of want to keep it simple like that. But then, as kind of when we do supplements, so normally we tend to do one. Or,
is this another way of saying other books?
Well, kind of, yeah. We do a bit like the kind of General's Handbook. So we have Clash of Kings every year that comes out, and that's a balancing kind of thing. So if you play it, you'll probably want to get Clash of Kings at the end of the year because it balances everything. But generally, No, we'll
No,
do.
sorry, that was a bit of a stab at the one book you'll ever need to play 40k, and now it's like if you play Space Marines, you
Oh
need like seven. I more
no,
meant
no,
so.
you only need one book. You need that one book, and if you even and if you just want to play the game and don't care about the lore, then you can just get the gamer's book, which is half the size, softback, and away you go. So yeah, I think we always kind of want to make it so it's about that accessibility because if you get into a game and you're like, oh great, I need one book. Oh, actually, no, I need another five to actually be able to play what I want to do. That doesn't always sit well. So yeah, generally it'll be one book plus the odd supplement if we do online campaign or something like that.
Okay, all right. Well, that's great. And then, so what are the supplements? Are they pushing the story forward or just the rules forward?
Yeah, so it depends. If it's like a summer campaign, so for example, this year, if things go to plan, we'll have an online campaign called Halpi's Rift. So in there, you'll find out what's going on, and that is narrative. So that is moving the narrative along. Whereas Clash of Kings, which comes out at the end of the year, that's more about moving the rules along. So you'll get that one if you're a tournament player and you want to be ready for the tournament scene in 2021 or the following year. Yeah, so we'll tend to have one that's narrative based, possibly in the summer, and then one towards the end of the year that's rules based.
Okay, that's a huge positive. So just a book or a book, easy peasy. Is there any other source of like background, or is that just all found in those singular books? Like,
Yeah, so mainly is that we do we worked with Winged Hussar. They're like a publishing company in the US, and they write some actual short stories and fiction. But generally, yeah, the main way to get the kind of lore is through the main rulebook.
okay, positive. Apparently, there's also a chap on YouTube who does some good narrative videos as well. That's fun. There's narrative guys on YouTube killing it with just reading story out to folk. But
Yeah, I've seen him recently. I forget his name, but yeah, I didn't realize I'd never heard of him until like last week. But yeah, that's good as well. So you can learn a bit about this. I think I watched the Forces of the Abyss one that he just done.
Oh yeah, this is Arvundus.
That's it. Yeah, there we
Arvandus.
go. Yeah.
There we go. So Owen has put the link in the chat because at this stage, Owen, trapped in London on the lockdown, has watched all wargaming content available on any platform, in any variety. So had a question from Jonathan Atland, which I think is a great one. Do you perform open beta testing, or do you stick to a selected group of people? If so, how big is that group, and and how are the people selected? If you don't want to talk about that, that's fine.
No, I'm happy to talk about that. That's fine. So it's a mix actually. So we actually no, I suppose we do. Well, it depends. So like when we did Vanguard to begin with, we had an open beta test which anyone could take part in, and we accepted their responses. When it comes to things like Kings of War, we have the rules committee, and then they'll have a kind of trusted network of playtesters who are out there in the community who will test the game alongside them. For Dead Zone, it works similar. That we have the rules committee, and then we have a series of playtesters as well. So yeah, most of the time we are always happy to find playtesters in the community, and depending on the project, it will be open, and sometimes it will be kind of closed with those kind of people we know and trust. Because sometimes the worst thing is for things to leak out before you're ready for them to become public knowledge. But yeah, if the project's ready or the project's right for it, we will do open testing as well.
Okay, and then like, so what's your process? So like, obviously, like you said, the big book comes out, so Kings War 3, like, and the rules are available, and like you said, everything's in there, which is making me feel uncomfortable. That's great. Then what do you do about the rules that you fucked up and you need to change 2 weeks later?
But we never fuck anyone.
But do you have a process of relooking at? I know you said that you bring the book out every year, but like how solid would you think your testing is, like for your response time that has to be?
Yeah, so that's a good question actually. So what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at, because obviously when you do a new edition, there's an immediate knee-jerk reaction of everything's overpowered or everything's been nerfed. So we've kind of made sure it's all settled down a bit before we do any big changes. I mean, like with anything, there were a few typos and stuff that went in the main rule book, so they were corrected immediately as soon as we realised. But generally, there'll be, say, an FAQ and errata maybe halfway through the year, something like that, just to address any immediate concerns. And what that will be is that will be the rules committee and us looking at what's been happening at tournaments and feedback from, again, their kind of trusted network of tournament organizers. So if they're kind of reporting all the time, I think one thing that was coming through towards the end of last year that war engines were too powerful. People were turning up to events with 6 war engines or more, which is when it's a game that's meant to be rank and flank. The worst thing you want to see when you get there is 9 war engines, 2 dragons, and a couple of like troops. So it'll be a case of looking at that feedback to see if it is like, I guess, is it I don't know, a 24-hour problem, a 24-day problem, or a 24-month problem? And if it's a 24-month problem, then obviously you need to be looking at it and saying, okay, that needs fixing. If it's 24 hours because everyone's knee jerks and gone, oh my God, oh, this is broken, what are we going to do? Then we can probably ignore that to some extent. So, yeah, it's kind of constantly looking at it throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, addressing them in the big book.
So do you bring stats data in from tournaments? Like, do you look at tournament data, like, and do you have things like match win percentages of factions, or is that how it works? Is there armies of factions? Like, I'm looking now at the starter boxes. So dwarf army. I imagine I play just a dwarf army, like,
Yeah,
and then you see the win rates of those armies. Do you tend to react to that?
yeah, and it'll also be, you know, what you don't want any war game to be is like a certain unit becomes an immediate pick. That all of a sudden, like say for dwarfs, everyone's taking 3 iron belcher cannons. Well, okay, that sets off alarm bells, and then it'll be a case of like looking at it. So if we see that all the tournaments, for example, everyone's taking pretty much the same list or variations on a very similar list, then you can go, okay, well that's probably a problem that needs addressing. So yeah, it's looking at things like that, I guess, and yeah, looking at we have there's a website called KOWmasters.com, which is run by the community, and that collates all the data from all the tournaments in the UK. I think there's a similar one in the States as well, and that data is really really useful because you can see exactly who's winning, what's winning, and you can see their lists as well. So the website's done by a member of the community called Nick Williams. He's a massive Kings of War fan. He's been around for a while, and he's done this project off his own back. But actually, it's incredibly useful.
Yeah, you can see that currently Dan King is the best player. He's
So
doing.
Dan King, yeah, he's been around for the Kings of War scene for a long time. He's won. Now, did he win 3 or 4 of like the big Clash of Kings tournaments? But he's on the rules committee as well. So obviously, he's heavily involved in the tournament scene and can actively see when things aren't working as they should do because he's often playing against them when he's at a tournament.
Yeah, do you worry though, like that he, and this is no slight on Dan, but do you worry that he or anyone else who is in that rules committee but also a competitor is going to have an unfair advantage when they go to tournaments because they've been part of that testing system?
Not really, not really, because there's so we have 5 people on the rules committee. 3 of them are like quite heavy tournament players. 2 of them are more kind of fluffy narrative players. So I think if Dan suddenly kind of went, oh, well, I think Undead need a little bit of a boost. Everyone goes, well, wait a minute, Dan, you play Undead. I think it's kind of a case that they will quickly kind of shoot him down and say, well, you're doing this for your own advantage. I think just being on the rules committee.
Not that he would. We're not saying that he
No,
would.
no,
Yeah.
no, not at all. But I think there's kind of checks in place to make sure that they're not doing it for their own gain. And actually, being on the rules committee doesn't really give. It's a bit like when people say, "Oh, you work at Mantic, you must be really good at games." I am shit at all the games, but and I think it's a similar kind of thing for that. He is a very good player, which is kind of why we wanted him to be on the rules committee because he can spot things. But yeah, I don't think he's gaming it necessarily.
No, because I think it's a fair point. Like, because I think
Oh yeah, totally.
we're in such a small group. Like, I did a show several months ago now, maybe even a year or maybe even 2 years ago, where I looked at how different kind of large scale companies that weren't miniatures companies dealt with their player base and also with their like rules and dev team, and almost always they weren't allowed to compete in the event. Like, is it
Yeah,
a traditional standard, or there was like a, if you take Magic as an example, there's a window where you can't use cards and a bunch of other stuff. I think that's the case. That might be something else, but there was a bunch. So it's just an interesting question about how you guys approach that.
yeah. I don't think it gives him an advantage because he doesn't. It's not like they get access to new units before anyone else, or I suppose no, not really. I think Yeah, yeah,
if you guys had the money, like if you guys were spending enough money, would you be interested in having an in-house rules team, or like I know obviously you've got the designers, but would you be
yeah.
more interested in having an in like how important to you is that element of the game is pretty tight that you would want to pay for it, or is that like storage is more important, or like how high on the priority list? And obviously it's important, but obviously you guys also run a business, so it's kind of interesting to know where that lies with you guys.
I think it's good in some ways to have them as independent because what it means is they will push back on some of our decisions sometimes. So if we're trying to make a commercial decision, we're going to say, oh, well, look, we want to sell loads of this particular miniature, make it as broken as hell in the next rules. They will go, no, we're not going to do it. So they will actually push back because they help actually design the rules. I think actually having this independent means that we've always got kind of feedback immediately on what we're trying to do. Whereas I guess if they were in house, possibly there'd be nothing stopping us kind of making kind of slightly crazy factions that that might be a bit broken. So yeah, ideally we'd always love more people internally to do stuff like rules design and stuff because that can be one of the most difficult things, I guess. But yeah, I think actually the RC stuff works pretty well, really, actually, in terms of keeping us in check and helping make sure that we have a direct link to the community as well.
All right, sweet. Thanks for those. I know those are tough-ish questions, but it's nice seeing that there's a website up. That's cool. Like that's really rad. I love that. I love that you've got like a player rankings thing. It's all great stuff for me. And it's a great question from John in the chat. Another question is how big is your miniature team, and do they all work in house, or do you hire contractors? Do you have a process, or like?
Yeah, so we all our miniature designers work out of house. So our main guy is a chap called Luigi in Italy, because obviously everyone's got to be called Luigi or Mario over there. So he works independently to us. So what will happen is we will brief out to him what say for example the new goblins that we're doing. We'll give him a very detailed brief to say this is what we want them to look like. And then I think because Luigi's been working with us for a number of years, he kind of now knows what the style should be. So generally, we'll work with him, particularly for Kings of War. But then when we're doing projects, say like Hellboy, then there were loads of miniatures for that one. I can't remember exactly. Was it 60 different miniatures? So that one we needed to contract out to a different studio. So I think that was a studio in Spain that we got to do some stuff for us. So yeah, it's all kind of freelance and all independent outside of Mantic.
That's really interesting. That's cool. So you get to jump around. If someone's new is making some great works, that's really fun. So
Yeah, so like we're an ex Games Workshop. I can't remember his name now, but we've just done a new Asterian mech, so like a big robot, and that was done by an ex Games Workshop guy, and that's really interesting because they just bring in slightly different ways to do stuff, poses or slightly different ways to kind of what they think it should look like. So that's really good as well because it just means that we're always pushing our design further and further.
yeah, great. That's good. Next question. I'm sorry. There's just questions for you now, and
Right, it's fine. I'm happy to do it.
they're as good as
I've got
mine.
nothing better to do.
They're as good as mine, so I might as well ask them. Coming from a system where new releases, etc., can be received with controversy, this is MJ Pegasus's question. How do you players of Mantic games generally receive things like rules, updates, new additions? Being the community manager, how do you feel about that?
I mean, there's always that immediate, oh my god, the sky's falling whenever you do anything new. But I think that tends to settle down quite quickly. Kings of War third edition, for example, that came out in October, and actually a lot of the grumbles have kind of faded away. So yeah, it is always nervous when you do a new one, a new edition, but generally they tend to be pretty well received. Dead Zone second edition came out a few years ago, and that was a massive improvement on the first one. So that's now kind of, I think people recognise that was a lot better. And then what else? And then Clash of Kings. I guess when Clash of Kings comes out every year, there's a little bit like, I mean, what we don't want to do is completely illegitimize someone's army that they've been working on. So we never try and, as much as possible, get rid of miniatures or get rid of units because that's the worst thing. So that if you have spent particularly for Kings of War, if you've spent months and months and months building your army, the last thing you want to do is come to it and all of a sudden you can't use any of it. So we always try and make sure that if you've spent the time hobbying, that you'll be able to use that. And also often we'll do it so that you can use your miniatures in different games. So with Vanguard, if you do the heroes in Vanguard, there'll probably be your heroes in Kings of War as well. And then you might be able to use them in Dungeon Saga. Same with Dead Zone. You'll be able to use those in Warpath. So I think that's one thing we want to do as well, is make sure that if you've spent the time and the effort buying one of our miniatures and painting it, then we want you to get the most out of that miniature as possible. So you can use it in multiple systems as well.
Okay. Yeah, great. Another question, Scrivo's reminded me as well. Obviously, you did the Hellboy Kickstarter, which, as far as I know, went crazy well, as I understand. And that's because one of the friends of the show, Mr. James Hewitt, you worked with James on Hellboy, right? He was one of the rules designers, or the rules, Needy Cat Games. Was that a great experience working through that? Because do you want to tell us what happened?
Yeah, so obviously sometimes we'll do the rules internally and we'll actually design them ourselves. And other times we'll work, particularly for a big project like Hellboy, we'll work with a kind of outside source. So James actually, back in the day, used to work at Mantic before he went to Games Workshop, and he was heavily involved in the original Dreadball and some other bits and bobs of that. Then he set up Needy Cat Games, and we were like, we've been talking to him about doing some other bits and bobs, but we kind of knew that we wanted it to be a dungeon crawler, slightly different to like a normal dungeon crawler, a bit more fun, a bit more chaotic. And so we'd seen, obviously, James had done a lot of work on Silver Tower, so we knew he knew the genre of that kind of game. And so we kind of went with him. First of all, it was like a bit of a brain dump. We said to him, "Oh my God, we want Hellboy to do this, this, and this. He needs to put punching people through walls. And then there's this thing called the Deck of Doom, and that does loads of crazy stuff." And then he goes, right, and has to digest it all. And then that went through a number of different iterations. So he would come back and say, "Oh, here's the kind of way I think it should play." And then we would say, we're not sure about that. That's not quite what we envisaged. And then he would go back. So there was a number of times. And we do a similar thing with The Walking Dead All Out War. That's actually designed by Mark Latham, who does a lot of things. He works on like Harry Potter miniatures game, I think a bit of Batman for Night models as well.
Oh, cool.
So the good thing about that is obviously you get different people externally who have different ideas about how the game should play. So that means that I guess they all play a little bit differently, but then we want to make sure, as I was saying earlier, that they're all easy to pick up and play, because that's kind of what we want our mantra, I guess, to be, that it's simple to learn but hard to master. But yeah, working with James, working with Mark is always brilliant, because they just always bring new ideas to the table that we may not have thought about.
Yeah, that's cool. Especially, yeah, I think that's good as well, because if you just have your own internal group who don't ever go and explore or get in the job training, I think one of the interesting things I think is game design for tabletop games has still probably got like a lot of room to grow, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of, I don't want to say professionalizing, that isn't fair or right, but I think there could definitely be some room for growth in that as an industry. Like, as far as like you can't even get necessarily courses on learning some of these things right now anywhere in the world. Some places you can.
Yeah, so James has just started one actually for Needy Cat. They do one.
Yeah.
But I think I used to work in the video games industry, and it's quite interesting that it feels like the board game industry is, say, 20 years might be a bit harsh, but kind of certainly a number of years, probably.
I feel like 20 years is close. Like,
yeah. But it kind of like now, like you say, it's doing that kind of taking it to the next level of professionalism. So obviously you can do video game design courses or video game courses at university, and it feels like we're getting to that point where board gaming is now so mainstream, and a bit like you were saying earlier about people going to tournaments having that safe space, and wargaming is still not necessarily frowned upon, but still seen as like not quite as popular as board gaming. But I definitely think that we're seeing that there's a step change in how board games are viewed and how tabletop games are viewed. And it does mirror, I think, the kind of rise of video games. That 20 years ago, they were kind of seen as a bit niche. 20 years ago, 2000, they were a bit niche, maybe. There wasn't things like streaming services or things like that. So, yeah, I think there's definitely room to grow, and I think we'll see that expand massively over the next 10 years, I guess, really.
Yeah, that's great. All right, well, we're getting towards the end of the time. If anyone's got any final questions, please hit us up. If you've got any, what are the future plans? Like, obviously, it's such a tumultuous time at the minute. That's an
Yeah.
incredibly tough question to answer. But I'm sure you guys are planning to do more big, great things in the future.
Yeah, so we just did recently actually a week of we did like our own kind of virtual Adepticon, which is the stuff that we would have revealed at Adepticon. So it's things like doing the new goblins for the Kings of War,
Cool.
few sneaky peeks at finally doing some Ratkin miniatures for Vanguard. So we're always planning to move the games along and do new stuff for them. And sometimes it's a case of with Kings of War, it's backfilling and going back and units that we haven't had models for, finally kind of making the models for them, or releasing completely new stuff as well. But yeah, we're kind of hopefully planning for the online campaign this summer. We'll have to see what happens. That might end up being a kind of autumn campaign potentially, because it's a really great way to campaigns are a really great way to galvanize the community and make sure that all we really want is excuses to play games and I guess buy miniatures and paint miniatures and do everything with them. So kind of campaigns are a great way to do that. So yeah, we'd really like to do at least one of those this year. And we'll just have to see how it goes.
Okay, well, good. Yeah, I think I was just replying to what MJ Pegasus is saying in the chat. That thanks to you, Rob. It's been insightful, informative, and refreshing. Yeah, I've definitely loved having you on the show. So thanks so much.
My pleasure.
It's been really open, and I've loved it. And now I'm going to go click through the website and look at a bunch of stuff, which is fun. I'm currently looking at Ezekiel and Shiva, so I can
There you go.
so I can do my Tiger King. But honestly, like. I'm not saying anything, but if you guys release a Tiger King game, I'll live stream the shit out of that for like ever. That will be my main game. It will be like the Tiger King show.
I wonder if you could do a head swap on Ezekiel to like give him a bit of a mullet and
Well, I just don't know how. Like, I don't. Again, I'm not sure about processes and time. I don't know how long it
yeah.
takes to go from we could design it to it could be a thing, but that's right there. I think everyone in our community. But yeah, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks very much. I'm going to include absolutely anything, all the links in the show notes below. So if you guys are interested, you can click through it. If we wanted to get in touch with you in any other way, or watch a stream, or be involved in the community, how do we do that?
So we've got obviously a YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/mantic games. We've got the Facebook, which is Facebook Mantic Games. So when we also have a podcast, which goes out every Friday when I remember to upload it. Last week I uploaded it on a Thursday because I was confused about the day. And what we're doing for that one is actually at the minute we're interviewing, a bit like yourself, interviewing maybe Mantic staff or different members of the community just to find out what they're doing in isolation times, which has been really interesting actually. But yeah, we're on the typical Instagram, Twitter, and all that gubbins.
That's still worth saying. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been lovely. Thank you to everyone who's watched us live. You guys are fantastic. Thanks to everyone who listens to the podcast and anyone on the Honest Wargamer Patreon. Don't forget to join us later. At 7 o'clock, where me, Nick, and Tom will be playing Kill Team on Tabletop Simulator and probably swearing a lot, which is going to be fun. And then also join us tomorrow for the stream streak as well. But on Saturday, thanks to everyone for donating some money to get us the better internet, we are going to be doing a 12-hour streak. So we'll be streaming for 12 hours on Saturday, midday till midnight. If you want to join us, there's a prize. There's a bingo. There's a prize for bingo, which is cool. There's a bunch of stuff. So it should be a really fun day. So get your hobby ready or whatever it is you want to do and hang out with us. So that'd be sweet. Thanks, Rob, for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we'll just say goodbye to everyone on the podcast now. Right, screw those podcast guys. Right, but now we're going to go raid someone on Twitch. Have you ever done this before, Rob?
I haven't, no.
Okay, so what's really nice is you just go find someone who's got like one viewer, and then like 60 or 70 of you jump in and just give them a bit of encouragement, and they normally get really excited, which is super sweet. So I like to do this every day. At the end of the show, we've had a guy cry, which was fun. We've had all sorts. Okay, so we've raided that guy before, so now we're going to do this guy who might well have been streaming for 572 days. I don't know if I want to raid him because then obviously everyone will think that my 30-day streak is pathetic, but we'll do it anyway. Uh,
Inferiority complex about your streak.
yeah, absolutely. So we're going to raid that guy. And if you are joining us for the raid, just go say some positive stuff, support someone, make them feel good about their day. That's always a really great thing to do. And thanks for joining us live. See you guys soon.